A king once owned a precious tree which bore golden pears. Every morning, the king enjoyed tending to his garden. With a snip here and there, he lovingly kept every plant and border neat and trim. But this day he noticed something amiss. His eldest son, who was wicked and scheming, sidled up and asked his father what troubled him. "Son, someone has been eating my precious golden pears." The prince, seeing an opportunity to win his father's favour, announced that he would keep watch for the thief that very night. His father promised to double his allowance should he catch the culprit. That evening, the elder son stood guard by the golden pear tree. But as time wore on, he was becoming a little sleepy, and being inclined to sloth, his concentration waned. Night fell, and the next morning found the son waking from a deep sleep. Oh no! Another golden pear eaten. Fast approaching were his father and younger brother. How would he explain that he had missed the thief? Expectantly, the king inquired if his son had caught the culprit. The elder son floundered as the king discovered the newly eaten golden fruit and became enraged. The younger son calmed his father, saying he would guard the tree that night. The older brother snarled. That evening found the younger brother guarding the pear tree. He too began to feel weary as night wore on. At dawn he appeared to be asleep. What was this? The younger brother was not asleep at all. He was astonished to see a most beautiful golden bird eating his father's fruit. So, this was the culprit. Later that morning, the king and elder son asked if the thief was yet caught. To their surprise, the younger son explained about the golden bird, and at once his brother, seeing another chance to win his father's favour, declared that he would set out to hunt down the supposed winged villain and bring it back for his father's pleasure. Soon the artful prince was striding through the deep forest where he supposed the bird would be found. A witch! She knew what he sought and advised that instead of shooting the golden bird, all he had to say was, golden bird, fly to my hand." But the prince roughly pushed her aside. "You'll be sorry." Deeper in the forest, the son spied the golden bird. Stealthily, he aimed his bow. He'd been trapped. Some time had passed, and when the eldest son had not returned, his brother implored the king to let him hunt down the creature. At first, the king refused. He was reluctant to lose both his sons in the pursuit of this mythical beast. But the lad was so insistent that eventually his father succumbed to his pleading, telling him to take great care. The young prince made his way along the same path as his brother. He too was convinced that this was the place to find the golden bird. The same strange figure waylaid him and asked his business. The prince kindly explained he was hunting the golden bird. She gave him the same advice. Should he find it, he must say, golden bird, fly to my hand, and it will obey. The prince graciously thanked her for her suggestion and went on his way. He carefully made his way deeper into the forest, and soon he spied the golden bird. He lifted his bow to take aim when he remembered the witch's words. What were they? He tried to recall. Golden bird, fly to my hand. And sure enough, it did. He quickly caught it in his sack, now home to show his father his trophy. He strode home, wondering if by now his brother had given up the hunt. Hello, brother dear. It was his brother. He rushed to release the rope. Suspecting the golden bird was in the sack, he dealt him a blow and greedily reached for it. But as he opened it, the bird furiously pursued him off into the forest. The younger prince came too. What had happened? Where was his brother? The sack was empty. He was downcast. But then a golden light approached through the trees. It was the bird returning to him. It happily hopped into the sack, and the delighted young prince headed homeward. His elder brother, ashamed to return, never entered the palace gates again. And the golden bird lived in luxury in the palace, where golden pears were fed to it every day. There was once a couple who had an only daughter, and she was loved by an honest farmer called John. One day, the girl's father was sent out to draw some water from the well. Looking down the well, it occurred to him that should his daughter marry John and have a child, it might, one day, be playing by the well and happen to fall in and drown. This thought filled him with much sorrow. Inside the cottage, his wife wondered why her husband was taking so long to fill the pail. What was he doing there? Sitting and daydreaming? Vexed, she began to scold him for being so lazy. But then he started to explain that he was weeping for their grandchild, who one day might fall down the well and drown. Being a simple soul, it took a moment for the tragedy of the situation to sink in. But when it did, she too began to weep and wail. Some time later, their daughter returned from market. When she came across her parents sitting by the well weeping bitterly, she was greatly concerned. Together they explained her father's fear about her having a child, who one day might fall down the well and drown. The daughter was distraught at such a possibility, and she also began to weep. By and by, Honest John, the girl's betrothed, arrived at the cottage. No one at home. That's strange. He spotted the three of them huddled by the well. Fearing some terrible calamity, he was anxious to know what was wrong. At once, all three began talking together, explaining the dreadful possibility of their future child falling down the well and drowning. Honest John was dumbfounded at their stupidity. Then it struck him that it might be great folly to marry into such a foolish family. He announced that unless he found three greater fools than they within a day's walking, he would call off the wedding. Honest John set off on his walk, convinced he would find no one more foolish than the three sillies he had left behind. After a while, he came across a man trying to get his goat to climb a ladder. The man explained he was enticing his goat onto the roof to eat the loose straw left over from his thatching. John thought this a very silly idea. He suggested to the man it would be simpler to gather the loose straw and throw it down to the goat to eat on the ground. The man thought about this suggestion carefully, and when he realised it was a much better idea than his own, thanked John profusely for his good advice. That's fool number one, thought John, as he continued on his way. A little further on, he came upon another strange sight. Here Here was a man trying to take handfuls of water from a bucket to his horse. John recommended that it would be more sensible to take the whole bucket to the horse so that it could drink directly from it. The man thought this a splendid suggestion and thanked John, who marched off thinking he had found fool number 2. Sometime later, John came across a man jumping about trying to catch something in a sack. The man explained he was trying to catch sunbeams to take to his corn which was stored in a dark barn. Wouldn't it be more sensible to spread the corn outside in the sun to ripen? The man thanked John for his good advice. That's fool number 3, thought John. It appears my betrothed is not such a silly after all, thought John, and he turned purposefully homeward. Meanwhile, the daughter was sadly making her way to the well, believing she had lost her true love forever. He had returned. Honest John then told her of his day's adventure, about how he had met the first silly trying to pull his goat onto the roof, about how he had met the second silly trying to take handfuls of water to his horse, and about how he had met the third silly trying to collect sunbeams in a sack. Honest John and his beloved were married and soon had a son, but he didn't fall down the well because John had put a fence around it. And they all lived safely ever after. Once upon a time, there was a woman who lived with her daughter in a small cottage on the edge of a wood. One day, the woman baked 5 mouth-watering pies and put them on the kitchen table to cool while she went outside to do some spinning. Her daughter, who had been working hard chopping wood for the fire, thought that the pies looked so good it would do no harm to sample one. Delicious. A little later, she passed by with a heavy load of washing. One more pie wouldn't be missed. By and by, the same fate befell the 3rd pie. Now there were only 2 pies left. They were so delicious that she could not resist just one more. A single pie remained. Should she take it? Surely her mother had meant them for her anyway. Yes, go on, enjoy it. By now, her mother was becoming rather hungry. "Daughter," she called. She asked the girl to fetch her one of the pies she had left to cool. "A pie?" Sheepishly, the girl confessed that as they were so delicious, she'd eaten every single one. Her mother was so angry that she told the girl to get out of her sight and cursed, "My daughter ate 5 pies today." It so happened that a young king was riding by and heard the woman cursing. Embarrassed, she made out she was boasting that her daughter had spun 5 bales of flax that day. The king was amazed, and when he caught sight of the girl's beauty, declared that he would marry her if she could spin 5 bales a day for 5 days. But if she failed, he would lock her away for deceiving him. The girl protested, but the king insisted he take her at once to his castle, where her skills would be put to the test. Later that day, the girl sat alone in a castle room. She started spinning, but realizing her task was impossible, began to weep. "Why are you crying?" The girl told the strange little man she had to spin 5 bales of cloth a day for 5 days. An impossible task. "But who are you?" The little man said he would strike a bargain. He'd spin her cloth every day, and when he returned with the 5 bales, she could have 3 guesses at his name. If she hadn't guessed it by the 5th night, he would claim her as his own. The girl agreed, as long as he returned by 5 o'clock each evening before the king came to inspect her work. "I'll be there," he cackled, and disappeared into thin air. The day wore on, and soon it was approaching 5 o'clock. The girl was becoming anxious. Soon the king would be arriving to inspect the first batch of cloth. Oh, where was the little man? "Here are the 5 bales." The little man demanded her first 3 guesses. "William?" "No." "Robin?" "No." "John?" "No." She had 12 guesses left. The little man promised to be back the next day. He vanished just as the king entered the room. He was at once impressed, and the girl was greatly relieved. The next evening, the little man reappeared with more bales. What were her guesses today? Was it Jim? No. Was it Charles? No. Was it Daniel? No. I'll be back tomorrow. And there were 9 guesses left. The third night was the same. The little man dropped the bales and demanded she guess his name. Christopher. Wrong. Gordon. Wrong. George. Wrong. There were 6 guesses left. On the 4th night, after the girl had guessed the little man's name wrong again, the king arrived as usual to inspect her work. He was delighted with her progress and called to his servant to bring in food, as he wished to dine with the girl that night. He was beginning to fall in love and wanted to spend some more time with her. He began by telling her of a strange sight he'd witnessed while out hunting earlier that day. He was riding along in the forest when he noticed a strange little man, dressed from head to toe in red, spinning furiously and singing a strange song. They know me nay, they know me not, because my name is... Oh, what was it now? Tom Tit Tot. Tom Tit Tot. The girl knew at once that this was the name she'd been trying to guess. On the 5th and final evening, the little man appeared, saying she would soon be his, as she had only 3 final guesses. The girl pretended to think hard of a name. Roland. No. Matthew. Wrong. One more guess and she was his forever. Tom Tit Tot. The little man screamed. How could she know? He jumped about with rage and vanished forever. With her task complete, the king now asked her to be his wife. She happily accepted, and soon they were married. And as his queen, she never had to touch a spinning wheel from that day to this.
Once, long ago, There lived a woodcutter and his wife in a small cottage in the middle of a large forest. Every morning the woodcutter would set off to chop down a tree to sell as firewood in the village, and every morning he would forget to take the packed lunch that his wife had prepared for him. Once she had seen him on his way, the woodcutter's wife would busy herself around the cottage, cleaning and dusting. But first, a good, strong cup of tea. This morning, the woodcutter ventured deeper into the forest than he had ever done before. He was searching for a particularly fine beech tree to sell to the village carpenter. At last he found the perfect tree. Suddenly, it was a tree fairy. She was begging him not to chop down her tree, but to spare its life. Although dazed and overcome with fear, the woodcutter managed to nod in agreement. The fairy thanked him and gratefully granted him 3 wishes, but advised him to use them wisely and not to waste them. Then she disappeared. Meanwhile, his wife was starting to prepare their supper. Brimming over with excitement, he rushed to tell his wife of what had happened in the forest, but his gabbling confused her. So, gathering his thoughts, the woodcutter sat his wife down by the fire and started to tell her the whole story about how he was looking for a particularly fine tree and how he met the tree fairy, and how, after he had promised not to chop the tree down, she had granted him the 3 wishes, but told him to use them wisely. By this time, the woodcutter's wife was getting as excited as he, and so together they started to plan and dream of all the wonderful things that could be theirs if they used their wishes wisely. They dreamed of riding in golden coaches pulled by snowy white horses, of holding grand balls and sumptuous feasts, of commanding fleets of sailing ships to bring back strange and wonderful treasures from faraway places, of owning great castles with mighty armies, so that no one could take away their riches. Then the woodcutter sat back and asked for his supper, but his wife hadn't had time. No time? But the woodcutter was hungry and wished aloud for a nice black pudding. His wife was furious at his stupidity, and without thinking, she wished the black pudding was stuck to his nose. Then the folly of their ways dawned on them. They had wasted 2 wishes, and now there was only one left. The woodcutter's wife had an idea. Stop! The woodcutter couldn't bear it any longer. He didn't want to lose his head as well as his nose. He had to use the 3rd wish. And so the woodcutter and his wife sat down to eat their supper. They were not rich and powerful for the rest of their lives, but they had their love for each other, and they did enjoy as fine a black pudding as the heart of man could desire.
Once upon a time, a woman had 2 daughters. One was her stepdaughter, who was kind and hard-working, but she only loved her other daughter, who was bad-tempered and idle. The stepdaughter was made to do all the housework, while her lazy sister sat about all day, making her work all the harder. One day, the mother, who could see no wrong in the lazy girl's behaviour, shouted at the good daughter to get out from under her feet and do some spinning. Heavy-hearted, she made her way to her favourite spot by the well in the woods, where she began to spin. She put down the spindle to unravel a knot of flax, when it was bobbing about on the surface of the water, just out of reach. Slowly the girl opened her eyes. Had she drowned, or was this a dream? She was in a beautiful garden. The air was filled with a scent of honeysuckle and roses. Through the greenery, she noticed a pretty house, and at that moment, an old woman appeared and beckoned to her. The woman told the girl not to be frightened, but to come inside as she needed some help in the house. The girl hesitated, but seeing the woman had such a kindly face, agreed and was shown indoors. Once inside, the girl realized that there was a lot of work to do. The old woman apologized for the state of the place, explaining that she was too old now to cope on her own, and told the girl just to do her best. The girl set to work, and being so good and hard-working, the place was soon looking spick and span. The old woman was delighted with her work. Every speck of dust had gone, and a fire was burning merrily in the grate. The woman announced that she would now reward the girl for her good work, and told her to hold out her apron. A shower of golden coins cascaded down on her. The girl was overjoyed at this magical reward, and in return was told that if she stepped through the back door, she would find herself only a short way from home. When she returned, her stepmother began to berate her for neglecting her duties in the kitchen. But she was silenced as the girl emptied her apron on the table and explained the whole story, how she'd fallen down the well and met a magical old lady in a little house in a beautiful garden. Astounded and greedy for more gold, the mother instructed the lazy daughter to make haste to the well, to jump in, and to be sure to bring back as many coins as she could carry. As her sister before her, the lazy girl awoke to find herself in the beautiful garden. But, unlike her sister, she didn't bother with the beauty around her, but marched along until she found the little house, and again, there was the old woman at the door, beckoning for her help. Ungraciously, the girl brushed aside the old woman in her haste to find more gold coins. By some strange trick, the room was as messy as on the good sister's arrival. Once again, the old woman apologized for the state of the place and asked the lazy sister to do her best to tidy up. But, never having had to work hard in her life, the girl somehow managed to make the room even messier than it had been before. The old woman was dismayed at what she saw. When she noticed the old woman had returned, the girl jumped up, eager to claim her reward. A thick layer of dust lay on every surface, and the fire had not even been lit. It was a dismal sight. The old woman told the girl to hold out her apron. This was what the lazy girl had been waiting for. But instead of gold, black soot poured down on her from above. At home, the mother was anxiously awaiting her daughter's return, when a filthy figure stumbled in. The daughter tearfully explained that instead of gold coins, the horrible old woman had tricked her and covered her from head to toe with soot. Cheerfully counting the last of her coins, the good sister announced that they would be burdened with her no longer, as she was off to see the world, and she left them with a couple of coins as a farewell gift. And so she left them to share their misery. If they learned their lesson, we shall never know.
Once upon a time, a king was displeased with his daughter, for although she was beautiful, she was spoilt and rude. Whenever anyone came to ask for her hand in marriage, rich or poor, she would laugh at them and tell her father that she could not possibly marry anyone so ugly. Her poor father had to keep making excuses for her bad behavior. The princess had already ridiculed the most eligible suitors of the land. The king's patience eventually ran out. He insisted she marry the very next person who walked through the door, prince or peasant. He could no longer stand her insulting behavior. Horrified, the princess cried to her father not to make her marry such a disgusting Grizzly Beard. She promised to be good and not laugh at any more of her suitors. But the king's mind was made up, and he gave his daughter's hand in marriage to the poor beggar. After they were married, the beggar and his bride set off for his home, which was far away in a distant land. As he walked ahead, his new wife had to struggle along behind, weighed down by her belongings. On and on they walked for many days, across hills and dales. Somehow the princess managed to keep up with the beggar, though her feet had become blistered and worn. Just when she thought the last of her strength was gone, they reached her new home. No more than a hovel in the woods. The beggar made his wife work her fingers to the bone all day and every day until her rudeness was worn out of her. Long hours each day she toiled. ordered his wife to make a batch of pies and take them to the castle on the hill, as the king was getting married and everyone must take something for the feast. The next morning, the princess set off for the castle nearby. On her arrival, instead of being shown to the kitchens, she was told to take her tray of pies to the main hall. But who was this sitting on the throne? She looked amazed. It was her beggar husband, but... he was a king. The king revealed that because she was so spoilt and rude, he and her father had agreed to teach her a lesson. If she was willing, she could stay and be his queen. And they lived reasonably happily ever after.